Hello everyone, just a quick word from your friendly editor/husband. For all of you who listen to So I'm Watching This Show and own an Android device, do me a favor. Go to the Google Play Store and download the Podcast Republic app. It's a fantastic app that allows you to get all of your favorite podcasts directly on your Android devices. I use the app and love it. I can search for the podcasts I want to listen to, select them as favorites, and have them all just a click away. Make sure you set So I'm Watching the Show as a favorite so you don't miss any new episodes. Again, the app is Podcast Republic, available on your Android device. Thanks!
I'm still not recovered from that.
Yeah, I had a tickle in my throat almost all afternoon.
Are we getting sick? So help me God.
No, I refuse. I
cannot get sick right now.
I will not do it.
Oh, shit.
What?
Do you know what today is?
February 15th?
It's Excalibur Day!
I thought you were being serious.
I'm excited. Are you excited?
I could be excited, but I'm not really. I'm doing it for you.
I know. So, last year we did Fantasy February, and I really enjoyed it. And all of our fans were clamoring for more. They were knocking down the doors.
Fantasy February Part 2.
For more Fantasy February. And we talked about doing it. We talked about doing a couple other things like gothic romance or period pieces and stuff. And we kind of just settled on everything.
Yeah.
So also nothing. So what we usually, the way we usually do it.
Just like what we did for December this year.
Yeah. And so the one relic that snuck its way through was Excalibur, because I want to watch Excalibur because I've never seen it. And when I brought it back up again, when we were planning the month, you were so bummed. You were just like, God damn it. And you were like, I really had hoped you had forgotten about that.
I did hope.
So what is your beef with Excalibur?
I don't like movies from the 70s.
Well, it's 81.
I don't like that either.
Is it too close to the 70s?
I don't like those 70s and 80s fantasy movies where they try to be fantasy movies and they clearly don't have the money.
Oh, that's your issue?
I just don't like it. And I know that Helen Mirren is in this, but I don't think the acting is going to be good. There are points in movie history where acting was bad, and it makes me angry. And I feel like this is going to be one of them, despite the Helen Mirren of it all.
So there's a thing. It's like a sword and sorcery thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't with that kind of stuff.
Okay. Take it down a notch.
All right. I'm still going to watch it.
I know, but so it's like that like mural painted on the side of somebody's van that they smoke pot in, of like a busty like sorceress riding a dragon and stuff. And I have a weird fondness for it because growing up as a child, I obviously liked fantasy. And I guess my dad was never that person, but he was just slightly adjacent to it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of grew up. I had several of the books of like Frank Frazetta and like Julie. Oh shit, what's her name? I almost said Julie Newmar, and that is not it. Julie Bell, maybe. And it just the like really cheesy 70s and 80s, like it's when bodybuilding was in, but also fantasy. And everybody has bangs for some reason. And so there's this really tacky, guilty pleasure thing about it for me. And I've wanted for them to make a big budget, just like a big movie rooted in that. And it is possible because we kind of got it with Thor Ragnarok.
Kind of. I would say also it's going to be a bit more serious for sure. But like Dune is coming out this year.
That's true. That is closer to it.
Yeah. But that is really what my issue is. Also, the aesthetic is not appealing to me in any way. So I'm not having fun with the acting, and I'm not having fun with the way that it looks. And so I just end up not having fun.
When I was trying to pitch it to you with Helen Mirren, I was like, she's wearing a chainmail bikini and a top knot. I was like, does that not interest you?
I mean, it's certainly intriguing.
But I also think there's like hella people in it before they were people.
Sure, okay.
Like I think we're going to get like a 21-year-old Liam Neeson or something. Mm-hmm. which that sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
I remember it because I've told you about the catalog, the Errol's video catalog that we had.
If you think $2 can't buy you much entertainment anymore, take a look at what Errol's Video Club members are watching tonight.
And when I was like 9, I would be looking for fantasy films, and I remember seeing it. I remember wanting to watch it, asking my parents to watch it, and my mom was like, no, it is too violent. And so I've literally seen the scene with the lady in the lake, because she is in this version, shockingly.
Okay.
And that's all I've ever seen. So I've wanted, you're going to hate it. I know you are, but I think the entire thing has this like Gaussian blur over it.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's just like everything that you're saying is like all of the shit that I don't like about movies from the 70s. The acting, I think, is going to be real bad. There was just like, it feels like there was a decent amount of nuance in the 50s and the 60s. And even when there wasn't the nuance, it was like sex comedies, which I'm into. And then the 70s went so like gritty, realistic in a way that like is so unappealing to me.
The 50s and 60s were very affected. It was very performing entertainment. And the 70s is when we started, like that's when they started allowing lens flares and stuff.
But it also somehow the acting degraded.
Yeah.
Like there's so many movies I've seen from the 70s and the early 80s of a caliber where I just am like, how? Because they're often very good actors like that. I love Helen Mirren. I think she's extremely gifted, but I just know
Patrick
that she's...
Stewart is in this.
Who?
Patrick Stewart.
That could be fun. I just know that they're all going to be delivering these lines like terribly. I just know it.
Well, let's find out. Let's find out. So I am stoked, and I am fully prepared to immediately regret.
You're going to love it.
I'm prepared to get like 15 minutes in and to be like, I got what I wanted, and I should have learned Fantasy Island style.
Okay.
Should have learned be careful what you wish for.
Okay.
I'm prepared to be a little bit bored. It's got to be better than the one with Clive Owen and Keira Knightley. So
they made Excalibur?
King Arthur, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
that's fair.
Well, let's go find out.
A world of wizards, kings, warriors, queens, swords, sorcery, and desire. Forged of splendor and magic, where future meets past, flesh meets steel, and the only fear is the pain of love. Excalibur, sword of power, sword of kings.
Did you want to ask me anything?
I want to ask you a lot of things. Number one, how dare you? No, I mean, I feel about it mostly exactly how I thought I was going to, but I do have one major gripe. And it's the thing that I have a major gripe about with all media dealing with the Arthurian legend, which is, why does it have to be so goddamn boring? It's so boring. It shouldn't be boring, and it just always is. It's such an interesting story, and I just find it every adaptation so tedious. And even this, which was like fully and completely England in the 1980s bonkers, it was still just swaths of boring nonsense.
Okay.
Did you like it?
Not really.
Yeah, okay.
When all is said and done, I'm actually very glad that I watched it.
Sure.
Number one, to check it off of my list, and number two, so that I don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
And I do feel, as, you know, a storyteller and an artist, that my life is slightly enriched having watched it. But
yeah, I mean, I feel that way about most movies that I watch. Even if I didn't like it, I'm usually glad I watched it. Like, we talked recently about Uncut Gems. I really didn't like it, but I'm glad I watched it.
Mm-hmm. These are the types of movies that should be being remade.
Oh,
like
100%.
That were kind of classics in their time. And the thing, to go back to your point with the Arthurian legend being boring, because I myself am the same way, where I'm like, how have we yet to tell a compelling version of this story?
Yeah.
And there are several versions that are good, and there might be a little bit of retread in this conversation, but we covered the miniseries Merlin last year in June for Midsummer.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's probably the definitive version, even though it takes plenty of liberties. I find that version a little bit more boring, or a little, not more boring, but I find it a little bit boring as well. But I think the hardest part about adapting this story in particular is it comes from a period in time where stories were plot based. And as a society, we are in a place where the majority of stories we are interested in are character driven.
Yeah, and I understand and agree with you. However, I feel there must be a way to tell the Arthurian legend character based.
There absolutely is, and I don't know why no one's keyed in on that. And I think the most fatal flaw is because they're trying to tell all of it, because it is a grand sweeping story.
Yeah, and I mean it takes place over
3 generations.
I was going to say at least 2 generations. I guess I would say, why is nobody doing another miniseries or a limited series about this instead of first of all, this movie was too long, and still
so long.
It wasn't enough time to properly do everything. And that's another thing that I have an issue with. And I wonder if it's because there's only so much definitive text about the Arthurian legend, and so much of it is just what people infer or whatever, what has passed into actual legend. But it always seems to pick up in the middle of in the middle of the story anyway. So there always, when I start watching one of these things, is the implication that I'm picking up something in the middle of it without the knowledge that I need to get started. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then it always ends in a place where it's because I feel like Merlin ends when they leave for the quest for the Holy Grail. Mm-hmm. And I just am there's more there.
I think another reason why Merlin is more successful is because they took it and ran. And I mean, like we mentioned during that, the Queen Mob is completely, she's created for that production.
Well, and that one is also very visually fulfilling to me in a way that this one, Excalibur, was not as much, but there were definitely moments where I was well, that's nice.
There were entire moments where I was loving this, and it's the kind of thing where it's I absolutely appreciate it for what it was. And I guess it's what you were talking about in our intro before, where it's this was an odd time for cinema. Mm-hmm. The art of filmmaking was changing at this point, because this is also one of those where the entire movie is ADR'd, and
is that why it was weird?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of it. Everything was ADR'd. So there's this slight kind of huh? It just doesn't, it feels inorganic in a way that, frankly, this being a fantasy almost is sort of fine with.
Well, yeah, it could almost suit it, except it's the only thing that's that weird somehow. Mm-hmm. And I was going back to the things that I like there were a couple costumes, Helen Mirren wears a couple of numbers where.
Oh, everything she wore.
Holy crap. But there were a couple of moments where I was this set or this location or whatever it is that they've built is so interesting, and it's so neat to look at.
Camelot was so interesting. It was all mirrored or glowing.
And then at one point, Merlin is walking through this these monolithic halls that are just very tall and stone and very imposing. And I was this is really cool, a really interesting set design that I couldn't imagine making this movie and being yes, and then the exquisite set design in this one and only scene. And it just was kind of weird, the places that they chose to do something like that, because then meanwhile there's that joust for Guinevere's honor later, and it's just in a weird half a clearing in the woods. I was what?
And that's why I'm I wish they would remake something like this, because I don't know if just the act of seeing a joust was exciting enough for an audience in 1981, because it is dishwater for us.
It's mind-numbing. Mind-numbingly boring.
There's so much here where it's you really can make this character-driven, but it's even the Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot love triangle, which even we were watching it, and I was why has no one ever fully properly mined this love triangle?
Yeah.
Because it's always Guinevere cheating on Arthur with Lancelot. And I don't think productions ever give Lancelot and Arthur enough stuff, up to and including maybe even some sexual chemistry.
Okay, you've never watched The Mists of Avalon.
Okay.
There's a little bit of stuff in there, and also Lancelot is Michael Vartan.
You've told me that before, but
it still was like a TBS miniseries, so there's still like not a lot, but there is a little.
But it's like we're meant to believe, we're meant to be invested and believe in Lancelot and Guinevere's dalliance based solely on the knowledge that, I mean, it's fable, it's legend. That's the other thing, is it's like we literally know everything that's going to happen,
right?
And it's kind of like they're just like, oh, well, we don't have to try because everybody already knows. And I'm like, no, the trying part is what will make us care.
To which my exact argument will be, I know every character beat that is meant to happen in Little Women, and yet, the new Little Women was absolutely breathtaking at every single moment.
So we need Greta Gerwig's Excalibur.
Oh my God, I would fucking die. But to your point,
out with a top knot.
Sure. To your point, it is the trying. You're correct. Where it's like, just because I know doesn't mean I don't need you to prove it to me.
We're supposed to believe that Lancelot and Guinevere make eyes once across a courtyard, and that's enough to fuel the next 40 minutes of the story. And the accusation, and
the main conflict, and the fact that it can like ruin Arthur's reign and legacy, and that fucking young Liam Neeson is gonna go the fuck off at a round table meeting
because he accuses them before anything's even happened. Like, they're not even going around like being sneaky and stuff in ways that there was so much time in this movie to have that.
Yeah, well, and that was my thing, where it was like, once they had the duel or whatever, Lancelot and Gawain had the duel for her honor, and he was like, Guinevere is innocent. The queen is innocent. It's fine. And I was like, well, for now, they're obviously going to start boning now.
It's like, you just gave them an idea. Like,
right.
Well, and you didn't realize who she was until that scene. Until she first saw Lancelot, and you seemed disappointed. You were like, oh, this is Guinevere.
Well, she just like, no shade on the actress. Well, shade on the actress. She wasn't very good at her. None of them were very good at their job acting in this movie. But
except I will fight you over Merlin.
That's right. He was at least doing something.
That was a performance and a half.
Absolutely, it was a performance. He was doing something, and I appreciate that.
What was the line he said where he was like, even now they lay siege to his castle.
Yeah, it was very that SpongeBob meme where everything is in different caps and lowercase.
Yeah.
So I just was so thrown off by her because I've only ever seen either blonde or very, very beautiful Guinevere's, and she was neither of those things.
She had the 80s hair in the bad way, in a way that Igraine and Helen Mirren and Morgana had like 80s hair in an awesome way.
Yeah.
And she had, because finally halfway through they decided to pull her fucking bangs. I'm telling you, the fucking bangs.
Bangs! I got bangs!
Who put the Lady of the Lake? It's like they got the chick from ABBA and put some sequins on her and were like, lay down.
It was like a shoulder length lob and bangs, like blunt
wispy,
bangs.
blunt bangs.
Yeah.
But yeah, they finally pulled Guinevere's bangs back halfway through the movie. And from then on, I was fine. Like everything she wore, all those headdresses and stuff.
Yeah,
and
the headdresses were great. Her veil was fun.
That wedding scene is unironically going to probably go into my top favorite wedding scenes. It was just so all in on its tackiness. And like, it was so glitzy and kitschy. And I thought she was just wearing netting at first. Like, I thought her veil was just like fishnet, but it was like actual metal, like beaded. Like, that part was amazing. And that's the stuff where I'm like, I want more of that.
Well, it was those moments where I'm like, I would be so interested to see this movie
good
with a 2020 budget
or even perspective.
Yeah,
I think the budget was there in 1981,
but the effects weren't there. The like tech wasn't there. The sensibilities weren't there.
Because you know what it was reminding me of, and it's because it's the sole factor that the armor was glowing. But it was reminding me of the Clash of the Titans remake, where I'm like, again, had they given that a story that made sense, that movie would be a delight. Like it would be such a campy, over the top, like fun thing if they actually just like leaned in and embraced what they were doing. I mean, we get to, Mordred stuff in this, and he's wearing like golden Cupid armor.
Yeah, incredible.
It was so awesome. And the fucking nipples, everyone gives Batman a hard time. No, it Helen Mirren, she's so good.
That's it, just Helen Mirren. And
I think her hair is real in this movie.
At least most of it.
Yeah, which that's impressive. It's like, considering that this was rated R and considering there's like 3 or 4 moments of actual gore, it's like they didn't take nearly enough advantage of the sex and violence that they were promising or that they were offering up to us. It's
the type of thing where like I feel like now that I'm a grown adult and I've seen stuff and I have access to hardcore pornography on my telephone, I'm gonna be really disappointed if I ever watch Caligula. You know what I mean?
Okay, so I want to watch it.
No, also, I do too. It's like it interests me.
Also, Helen Mirren, you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. It's just the type of thing where like I can see how in 1981 this was like groundbreaking when it comes to like sex and violence and stuff, but it just is like literally nothing I've never seen before. And I do want to say I couldn't tell the difference between the sex and the murdering a couple of times. Because like the Gabriel Byrne fucking Igraine at the beginning was like showgirls levels of unsexy.
Because we were talking about, he just basically lies on top of her in full armor, and it's like,
and it looks like he's just doing push-ups. He's moving the wrong part of his body. Like he's moving the top half of his body. Nowhere in the hip region is moving. And I was like, what? And then later there's a scene where 2 guys are fighting and like one of them's trying to kill the other one. And I was like, are they fucking? Because it looks just like the scene at the beginning. It was ridiculous.
Well, I had 2 amusing thoughts, and one of which is I think Helen Mirren, when she was younger, I think she has like major Jennifer Lawrence vibes.
Oh, I see it.
And so I was like, could you imagine Jennifer Lawrence in this? Like if we were to do this now?
100%.
It would be so... all of her costumes were so cool. And even the 80s-ness of it. Like, because a lot of times I'm like, ugh, man, this looks so of its time. And this is one of the few exceptions. Well, few exceptions. I would say like the big musicals of the 40s and stuff.
Yeah.
Where they look so 40s is part of the appeal. Because you made a comment about like the color, like the dyes not being accurate. And I was like, I don't want Helen Mirren not in.
No, of course
veils.
not. It just was like there was a full 70s like rainbow thing at one point. And I was like, well, know about all that. But the purple that she was wearing was spectacular.
All of, like,
I'm not mad about it.
All of the like LeMay and stuff. But
yeah.
Could you imagine if they made Lord of the Rings in 1981?
I don't want that.
This had a 79 on Rotten Tomatoes. I looked at it, although I kind of examined a few of them, and a lot of them are like in hindsight or contextual reviews. And I will say that Roger Ebert didn't particularly like the movie all that much. Yeah. He kind of complained about its lack of making sense and stuff. And I think if you're going to do the Arthurian legend, well, like I said, I think you should make it character based. And I think maybe you need a take, because I feel like this one in particular, and frankly, like, it's also which story are you telling? Because this is such a vast mythos. This is such a legend that it's like, are you telling Arthur's story? Are you telling the Lancelot and Guinevere story? Are you telling Merlin's story? Or are you like the story of Camelot is a different thing, because Camelot is an ideal. It's like not meant to, like, it's a metaphor. It's like Excalibur has a very the fruit of knowledge quality where it's like you can look at this from like a completely metaphorical place or even from like the advancement of civilization. It's like they start in a very primal place and then we create sort of a like utopia in which the downfall is inevitable. And it's like, yeah, I don't know.
In the first place, it was really all over the place. It's like absolutely a product of its time. There was too much and not enough. I think
somehow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there was too much of so many things and not enough of what I would consider the things that matter.
I loved the glowing. I like that things had a weird, almost supernatural sheen, because you mentioned even in the beginning.
I loved that. For whatever reason, that was very intriguing to me because Excalibur glowed green all the time.
Mhm.
And then you could see
You could at least identify it.
Well, sure. And then you could, because this is a movie that is burdened by a bunch of brown-haired men that look the same. So that was helpful, but it also reflected really neatly in the other men's armor.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like when you didn't know Excalibur was like happening at the time, or you didn't know it was there, or you didn't know who had it, you could sometimes see it flickering in other people's armor. And that's an interesting notion that like the Knights of the Round Table's armor can kind of like intuit that it's around. And like, I don't know if I'm ascribing too much to this, but like, that's what it sort of felt like to me. And that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, there wasn't enough leaning into cool stuff like that.
We were talking about Camelot itself earlier, but even like the round table, when they first showed it, I was like, man, now that looks like a round table. Like,
very cool.
It was massive and it was beautiful. I would be very curious to know if in 1981, if this were exciting, because you have to consider, you know, we were talking a lot about movies. You were talking about like not liking movies from that era, but I'm like, at this point, we're 2 Star Wars movies in, which I suppose Star Wars is the exception, not the rule.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I've never heard of John Borman before, and he was like the creator of this movie. So I don't know that he had the success of George Lucas. And
I think this was a big hit or a relative hit. Yeah.
Continued success then maybe. The other problem is as big problems as I have with George Lucas, he is without a doubt an auteur, and he is a visionary, and he absolutely knows what he wants out of the things that he is making. And I feel like this movie did not have that element.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't feel there was somebody who was like, this is 100% my vision and exactly what I want. Or maybe it did, and it's just not a vision that vibes with me.
Well, like I said, I mean, to reiterate my first point, this is the kind of thing that I think would benefit spectacularly from a remake with a more modern storytelling approach. Like keeping most of, if not all the beats the same. I just think if you really actually spent times with the relationships versus just trusting, it's like, you know, they do bits here trying to make us care about Percival that kind of works, but it's like you could do so much more with like an actual younger guy watching him try to impress the king. And
right.
I guess Guinevere is a little bit of a Daisy Buchanan type character, or do you think there's more to her? There should be.
I kind of see what you mean, that she's like Daisy Buchanan. Okay, yes. I think then, yes, she is a Daisy Buchanan, and I'll explain what I mean. Because there is so much more to Daisy Buchanan than we ever get in a screen adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's a bitch, and she's cold, and she's kind of controlling, and she's sort of using Jay Gatsby.
Which, sorry to completely cut you off, but remember, Once Upon a Time attempted that angle.
Yes.
And then just like...
Yeah. And so that's the problem with her and with Guinevere, where like, but I will say that to what I'm remembering, I think The Mist of Avalon gives that section of it more, because they are deeply in love. Like it's sort of like a love for the ages, like a love at first sight, love for the ages with Guinevere and Lancelot. And that is something that never really gets off the ground in so many of these adaptations. And it just like bums me out.
Yeah, I want her conflict. That's why I was like, I want the love triangle version of this and not the bitches be crazy. You know what I mean?
And there are so many, I feel like there's so many inferences, and this also might be me conflating The Mist of Avalon with like actual like legend, but to my knowledge there, and he even said something, Arthur said something in Excalibur, and he was like, will I ever have a son? And it's implied heavily that he and Guinevere cannot have a child. And so that's what happens in The Mist of Avalon, is Arthur is like, I need you to be with Lancelot so that we can have an heir, and we'll never know whose it is, but it'll probably be his. We just need to do it. And that's the kind of stuff that I find way more interesting than they gazed longingly across a courtyard and then they boned once and it was this horrible betrayal. And I'm just like, ugh, that's boring.
I'd be curious to know if anyone out there actually likes this movie.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty low on listens episode.
Sure, but that's not the point. if you do, and I'm being serious, and not being cute, but if you do, I would like to know why and what about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually very glad I watched it. I do feel like I accomplished something, but it's one that I can't imagine revisiting, because it's like last year we did Legend, and I could imagine watching Legend again, but this I'm kind of like,
yeah, it like most things from this era, I'm not mad that I watched it, and if you have some sort of nostalgia for it, I fully get it. I have nostalgia for tons of things that are shitty, but I would be curious if there's anybody out there who legitimately loves and enjoys this movie. I would really love to seriously know why.
Mm-hmm. Like, what about it?
I'm very curious what it is that appeals to people, because I think the biggest part of it for me that didn't appeal, aside from the fact that I find most adaptations of Arthur boring, the aesthetic is just so unappealing to me for the most part that I can't really get past.
But yet also somehow the aesthetic was the only thing you liked.
Exactly. It's very strange, but only moments of it. Yeah. Because like the weird like headpiece thing that Merlin was wearing the whole time, hilarious, amazing. I like don't have a bad word to say about it. But there were so many things too that were just like, really, that's what you were going for? Okay, that's fine. I guess.
Love that like Guinevere and Lancelot not only boned down just on mossy rocks, but then stayed there all night.
All night, fell asleep in the wild forests of the Dark Ages, and then butt-ass naked, then didn't hear Arthur plunge a sword down in betwixt them, and then woke up and shrieked about it in the morning.
There was magic happening there.
Well, sure.
But because then
she rubbed her face all over it.
You were mad that Lancelot ran his hand up it, and then
he looked surprised that he was bleeding, and I was like, dude, you just like fisted that sword. What were you expecting?
So that's not fisting. He was jerking it off.
Whatever.
So, okay. Well, that was Excalibur. Let us know if you want us to do Caligula. We need the real one. I started watching it, like, God, at this point, 10 years ago now, because I was in Hemingway. But I did start watching it, and then I stopped 30 or 40 minutes in because it was the R-rated version. And I was like, I'm not doing this. There's no point.
No.
Like, so.
Interesting.
Yeah, let me know.
All right. Well, as always, you can follow us on Twitter @SoI'mWatching, Instagram @SoI'mWatchingTheShow. We also link out to everything from our website, soimwatching.com, including our Patreon, where you can listen to us talk about TV shows every week. Currently, it is Riverdale and The Magicians, and 911 will be coming back pretty quick. And other than that, just rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. And that's it for us. Bye!